Hello, I can't tell you my name because if I do, it could put me in more danger than I am currently. So you can just refer to me by the nickname Greasy Steve. I used to work at Nickelodeon as a storyboarder for the show SpongeBob. I have decided that the world needs to know about something. There is a cancelled episode of SpongeBob called SpongeBob's Revenge. All of the normal writers were out that day, so we had to get a replacement writer. I'll get to them later. For now, I'll just say that they were a troubled person. The episode starts with SpongeBob watching TV with Gary. Except in this episode, Gary is Mouse for no discernible reason. I guess the writer thought it would be funny. SpongeBob is watching TV and having a good time until the news comes on. The news is going over normal news stuff, like all of the disappearances and unusual murders in the area. SpongeBob then makes a joke about socialists in relation to the murders and disappearances. There is then a knock on the door. It's Mr. Krabs. Mr. Krabs then asks, "SpongeBob, me boy, may you look at that wall and not turn back around?" SpongeBob then hesitantly agrees and looks at the wall. Mr. Krabs then steals Gary and runs off. It then cuts to a few hours later card before cutting back to SpongeBob. SpongeBob then says, "Okay, Mr. Krabs, can I turn around now?" SpongeBob then turns around and asks, "Where's Mr. Krabs and Gary?" He then finds a note by Mr. Krabs that says, "Ho ho ho, SpongeBob, me boy, I stole Gary and I will turn him into meat within the next 30 minutes. Ho ho ho, you're also terminated from your position at the Krusty Krab. Ho ho ho." SpongeBob's eyes then turn red and start to bleed blood. He then collapses to the floor and lets out an agonizing scream of pure pain and suffering. He then gets back up and smiles. He goes and gets an already bloody knife from the kitchen and says, "It's time to rip and tear." It then cuts to a shot of SpongeBob skipping into Squidward's house. Inside the house, SpongeBob confronts Squidward. Squidward, despite SpongeBob's bloody eyes and bloody knife, then says in an annoyed voice like it is some sort of daily occurrence, "SpongeBob, what are you doing here at this time of the day?" SpongeBob responds, "Hey Squidward, are you going downward into the grave?" Squidward then slams the door on SpongeBob. SpongeBob then cuts through the door and says, "Here's Sponge." It then cuts to an overhead shot of the house. You can hear Squidward's screams, and the scene ends. It then cuts to the next scene. SpongeBob is then in front of Patrick's house. He knocks on Patrick's rock and it opens up. Patrick is horrified at the sponge. He shouts, "Oh no, capitalism has stolen Sponge. I knew Mr. Krabs would corrupt you." Sponge then throws his knife and kills Patrick. He then laughs an evil laugh and says, "Now for Mr. Krab." It then cuts to Mr. Krabs cooking Gary in the Krusty Krab. He hears an explosion and runs outside. SpongeBob is approaching a giant space fortress. He's in some science fiction super armor and holding a super shotgun. Heavy metal is playing. Mr. Krabs then rubs his eyes. It turns out he was just hallucinating. He sighs a breath of relief and then turns around to go back inside, but the slippery little sponge is blocking the entrance. Mr. Krabs is scared, so he screams. SpongeBob laughs and shouts, "This is your end, Mr. Krab. Your reign of tyranny over fast food industry is over." The crab then responds, "I didn't do it to hurt you. I just wanted the money." SpongeBob then says, "I am now more powerful than I have ever been. Even King Triton will fear me now." SpongeBob then runs up to breaks Mr. Krabs' neck. SpongeBob then uses his sponge powers to fly away. He flies over Bikini Bottom and releases his hand. Fire then flies out of his hand and then rains down on the city. He laughs as the city is wiped out of existence. The episode then ends there. This episode was of course very disturbing, so there was an investigation. After later investigation, it turns out the writer of this episode was a cultist and murderer who had a sick sense of humor. They escaped before we could send them to jail. The episode itself was fully finished because the producer said to just keep working on it. That was before they actually saw it. I wanted to let people know because wait, who's knocking the door? Ah, who are you?